Not the best performance in the world from West Ham, it has to be said. The short version of what happened there was West Ham didn't try for most of the game. Then right at the end, we tried. It really is as simple as that. I'm going to go into a little bit more detail in the video, but I think David Moyes rolled the dice, tried to take his chances by playing a weakened team. And he did so in the hope that I guess he could rest some players ahead of the Everton game, which was a more important game than this one. I think you can sort of throw games like that. And don't get me wrong, I don't think David Moyes intended on losing that game. I think he thought it'd probably be enough that he could get at least a point from it. It didn't work. You can do that, but it puts all the pressure on the game, which you've made the priority, which in our case is the Everton game. Basically, West Ham have to beat Everton now, otherwise it looks really, really bad on David Moyes. I'm not going to change my tune on what I said when I did the morning video earlier on, and I said, look, this is one game West Ham don't have to win. I said, in fact, we can probably lose this game and still qualify top of the group. I still believe that. I'm not going to change my tune just because I thought West Ham produced a performance which stunk the place out, and it really did. But that being said, even I wasn't quite so ready for the listless and insipid performance that we got against Olympiacos then. Individually and collectively, it was awful. There were players who were awful, and it won't surprise you that they were awful because they don't really feature very much, and anytime we've seen them this season, they've been pretty bad. But also there were players who were awful who are usually very, very good. James Ward-Prowse would be a case in point. He's been magnificent this season. I think he's started really, really well his West Ham career. In fact, he's going to have a really excellent West Ham career. I'm in little or no doubt about that at all. But in this game, he was awful. Energy levels were bad. I mean, he was terrible for Olympiacos' opening goal. But I say he was. I thought collectively loads of people were. So I thought James Ward-Prowse wasn't good for Olympiacos' opening goal. He basically allowed the guy to turn him. He sort of did a little pirouette. It wasn't even a particularly fast one. Did a 180. Yeah, wasn't a 360. Otherwise, he would have ended up back where he started. He did a 180. James Ward-Prowse just didn't turn quickly enough. There was no urgency from him, and that was going to be a feature that was a part of the whole team's performance. And then Thomas Souček didn't recognise the danger. No urgency from him. He should have rushed out to close the player down, whoever had the long shot. And Mavropanos just sort of stood there and tried to do a block, which sort of worked. It sort of half worked. It just maybe it got a little deflection. I'm not so sure. But it was so far out, you would have felt that the keeper should and could have done better. So, I mean, there's four players. As Gio says, show me a goal and I'll show you a mistake. I saw four. Maybe I'm overanalyzing it, but I thought it was a bad goal. It wasn't just one individual error. Collectively, we were pretty rubbish. We didn't provide much. There wasn't much threat. Look, Moyes started with Danny Ings up front, and I remember I was making my notes for my player ratings, and I've got to say, tomorrow's player ratings on Patreon is not going to be pretty at all. It's going to be some low marks. There can be some ones and twos out of 10 in there. There really is. That's how poor I thought we were. But I wrote down in my notes that I thought Danny Ings, from 20 minutes onwards, looked frustrated. And I don't actually blame him at all. I just don't know what's going on there. I could tell you what's wrong with Danny Ings and what's wrong with a transfer and stuff about him not being, go into detail about why he's not suited to David Moyes' style, but we've discussed it all before. You know all this stuff. I know it, you know it. Do you know what? I think David Moyes probably knows it, but hey, he played him anyway. That being said, he wasn't West Ham's best player. It wasn't West Ham's worst player, but that's not saying much. Not many players came out of this with any credit at all. Danny Ings probably had 2 or 3 half chances. There was no real supply for him. He was pretty poor. Far from the worst, though, as I say. Who was the worst? It's quite hard to say. Thomas Souček was pretty damn bad. Pretty bad. And if his passing wasn't bad enough, he got frustrated with it himself. Not just frustrated. I think he sort of got upset that he wasn't able to do things that he wanted to do. His passing was really poor, and there was one pass in particular in the second half when he almost gifted Olympiacos a third goal. Olympiacos' second goal was a weird one. A guy cut in from the wing. Played, again, I thought Fornals could have closed him down more quickly. It wasn't a cross because he played it with his left foot, but it was something. It certainly wasn't a hard shot. There seemed to be some miscommunication between Areola and Ogbonna. I don't know. I only saw the camera angle from behind, so I couldn't see if Areola was speaking or if he wasn't, because I only see the back of his head. I can only assume he didn't say anything or Ogbonna didn't hear him. I guess that's quite reasonable to assume he didn't hear him. It's a really raucous, noisy stadium, right? But anyway, Ogbonna, he dangled out a leg and it deflected a weak shot, which anyone could have caught. You literally could have thrown your coat on it, or gilet in this weather, and it would have stopped the ball. But the deflection from Ogbonna's, well, it wasn't just an interception. I think the point was it was a complete miss kick. He missed it. I think had he have made the interception, wouldn't have been a problem at all. But it was bad. It was just bad hand-eye coordination, and it deflected in for their second. The game finished 2-1. That's far more flattering than West Ham deserve as a 2-1 scoreline. It really wasn't. They were much better. Olympiacos deserved to win that game. I thought our attitude stank. It was a lack of endeavour. It was a lack of application, and it was a very much a lack of aggression. It wasn't fitness. We just looked like we couldn't be arsed. And then you had some people who just weren't able to do it. People like Pablo Fornals. You can never say Pablo Fornals can't be arsed. Unfortunately, it was possibly a little bit worse than that. He just didn't have the ability to do it. That being said, I think I was less frustrated with Fornals than I was with Said Benrahma. Even though Fornals was probably worse than Said Benrahma was incredibly frustrating. And again, I could labour the point and tell you all the things that you already know about Said Benrahma. Just put it this way. Imagine Said Benrahma at his frustrating and wasteful worst, and this was it. But I still don't think Benrahma was the worst player. I'm not entirely sure who is. I'll have to wait until the player ratings tomorrow, and then we'll get to that in the player ratings programme tomorrow. But there were a lot of them. There were a lot of contenders. Probably easier to say who came out with a little bit of credit. Possibly Emerson. Kudus is worth speaking about him, because if you haven't seen the game, you'll want to know how Kudus did. He was one of the better players. But that doesn't mean he was good. He just wasn't as crap as lots of other people. He had decent strength. I felt sorry for a lot of players for lots of different reasons. I felt sorry for Danny Ings for a very different reason. I felt sorry for Kudus, but I felt sorry for Kudus, thinking, you're probably better than this. You probably don't deserve to be in this can't be asked second string team. Whilst I will talk about the individual players, a lot of this would have to go back to David Moyes and a lack of motivation, a lack of intensity, whatever the case may be. This did not look like a well-prepared or a motivated team. There you go, that's the word I'm looking for. Weren't motivated at all. Moyes made a load of substitutions on the 57th minute. You knew he was serious because he had them warming up from, I think, the 52nd minute. And they were on 5 minutes later. So this was serious stuff. Paqueta was on, and he came on for Fornals. The right decision. Bowen came on for Benrahma, and Antonio came on for Danny Ings. Look, Paqueta kept on giving the ball away. He was pretty poor, but he scored a wonderful, wonderful goal. It was really good. And it actually gave West Ham hope. We had a little bit of hope towards the end. And we tried, and believe it or not, we could have got a 2-2 draw, which we wouldn't have deserved. Far from it. Antonio was bloody awful. I mean, bloody awful. But I can't. He got his own video the other day. I'm not going to go into it again. He got frustrated. The players were frustrated. It's funny how frustration manifests itself in different ways. I think Danny Ings was just fed up. I think like Fornals looked sad. Antonio was so frustrated he got himself carded by barging someone over. I don't think that was just frustration with the tactics and how poorly we were playing. I think it was a bit of frustration with himself, and I think frustration that he wasn't getting much protection from the referee. But Antonio's always looking for protection from the referee these days. It's less beast mode, more sort of complain, mate. He wants to put in a complaint form to the referee. That the central defenders are being overly physical or whatever it is. I don't know. Cornet came on. I've been wondering actually why Cornet hasn't featured more for David Moyes recently. I'm not wondering anymore. Alvarez was all right actually. To be fair, got turned inside out a little bit, but he was all right. I mean, overall it was bad. really, really bad. But we don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. This is a review of that game, and it was pretty poor stuff. And but I don't think we didn't really need it. Didn't need to see that off the back of a 4-1 defeat to Aston Villa. I think in many respects, I felt we showed more threat against Aston Villa than we did against this lot. So even though the scoreline was different, it didn't feel massively different. I still felt as though we were outclassed. Maybe with Aston Villa outclassed in terms of ability. I think in this one outclassed in terms of application, really, which is not good at all, is it? But as I said, it puts the onus massively on Everton. David Moyes rolled the dice. As I say, I think he could have afforded to lose this one. I don't think he intentionally threw it. I think we were probably worse than David Moyes thought. I think probably two things would have really shocked David Moyes. I think firstly, his half-time team talk did nothing. We came out exactly the same. And I think the impact of his substitutions, there weren't any. And I know I probably contradicted myself by saying, because obviously Paqueta came on and scored and we could have got it to 2-2 at the end. And if you haven't seen the game, you're probably thinking, oh, hold on a second, you're wrong here. But I think for anybody that did see the game, you probably understand what I'm saying. It wasn't like that Bowen, Paqueta and Antonio came on and immediately changed things. I think the goal, and it was a good goal, it was a really good strike. I think that gave us a little bit of hope. I think that's the most annoying thing. At that point, we tried to think, well, why wasn't anyone trying before? I don't know. And do you know what? We'll never have the answers. I don't need to know. I'll tell you who does need to know. David Moyes needs to know, and the players need to know. We need to win against Everton just to put a little bit of feel-good factor back into things. Actually, otherwise it could be getting a little bit miserable. Ultimately, I still think we'll qualify from the group, and that's fine. It's a bit of a shame that the record couldn't go on. There was some confusion. I don't know. I heard that the 17 games, I heard that was a record. Then I heard afterwards it wasn't a record because Man United actually had a record, which I don't know. In many respects, I'm less concerned about the record than I am about the momentum. I think momentum is really important. And I think that sort of meant something, I guess, to the players, that record. Well, I assumed it did. Having looked at how they played, maybe it didn't mean too much at all to them. They certainly didn't seem to be fighting for it. But I think the momentum and the kudos and the way it allows you to puff your chest out by being, whatever, the best, undefeated for 18, 19 games, which it should have gone on for. I think there's a lot to be said for that. The one thing I worry about is there was a lot of confirmation, I think, from myself, and I'm sure it'll be a lot for you. There have been, when you saw the lineup, there would have been things you suspected and you worried about, and they probably happened during the game, and that's certainly the case for me. I think the worry is that those things may not be sorted, and we may well see them again. Dave Moyes got to swap things up a bit, and I think that for a couple of players, that's probably one crappy performance too many, and I think it will change it against Everton. What we've got to hope is that the rest he gave the players, and let's be fair, even the ones that played probably got a rest because they couldn't be asked, and I've said it a number of times, we've got to hope that works against Everton, and then hopefully this is a game which will be very, very quickly forgotten.